Imagine you are holding an apple. You feel the texture of its skin, the cool weight in the palm of your hand, the sweet aroma that emanates from it. For your brain, this is reality. But now, imagine that this apple is just an electrical signal, a perfect simulation indistinguishable from matter. If your consciousness cannot tell the difference, does the difference still exist? And here is the point that almost no one notices. Maybe the question is not about the apple, but about who is perceiving it. The philosopher Jean Baudrillard warned us that we would reach a point where the map would become more real than the territory. He called this simulacrum. We do not just inhabit this world of copies, we have been colonized by it. And the most unsettling part is not that this happened. It is that it happened slowly enough to feel natural. Simulated reality is not just around us, in our screens or in our artificial intelligences. It is advancing inward. Every digital interaction, every symbol we consume, and every moment we spend immersed in hyperreality is literally reconfiguring the architecture of your mind. And this raises a silent question. If the environment changes, who do you become within it? We are ceasing to be observers of nature and becoming extensions of the network. Human consciousness, as we have known it for millennia, is being rewritten in real time. In this video, we are not going to talk about science fiction. We are going to talk about your biology, about the death of the real, and about the dark truth that maybe you are no longer who you think you are. And if that is true, would you notice? Welcome to the desert of the real. Reality, as we know it, did not disappear with a bang, but with a whisper of symbols and representations that gradually replaced direct experience. Jean Baudrillard, with almost prophetic clarity, described this process as the rise of the simulacrum, a stage where the copy not only imitates the original, but renders it irrelevant. And when the real begins to feel inferior, something inside you starts to reject it. For those who lived through the last 4 decades, this erosion was subtle. The physical world, with its weight, smell, and imperfection, was gradually exchanged for polished interfaces, digital images, and mediated narratives. What was once a reflection of reality became an autonomous entity, a layer of simulation so dense that we can no longer see the ground we stand on. And perhaps the most dangerous part is that we stopped trying to see. We no longer live in the world. We live in its representation. And this fundamental shift is the first step toward the total reconfiguration of our consciousness, where the real becomes nothing more than nostalgic noise in the background of a perfectly orchestrated digital symphony. And in this new stage of existence, we enter what Jean Baudrillard called hyperreality, a state where the model is more real than the object it was meant to represent. Think about social media, digital maps, or cinematic experiences. They are not just records of life. They dictate how life should be felt and perceived. When a simulation of a travel destination is more vibrant and exciting than the physical trip itself, the original dies from insufficiency. And when that happens, you do not realize you made a choice. Our consciousness, accustomed to the edited perfection of the simulacrum, begins to reject the rawness of nature and the unpredictability of direct human contact. We are being conditioned to prefer the processed version of existence because it is designed to satisfy our desires before they even arise. And if your desires arrive ready-made, to what extent are they still yours? Hyperreality is a prison without bars, where the walls are made of mirrors that reflect only what we want to see, isolating us in a continuous present where truth has been replaced by the efficiency of the image. This migration to the simulacrum is not just an aesthetic or technological choice, it is a biological event that alters how our senses interact with the universe. The human brain is plastic, shaping itself to the environment it inhabits. And the current environment is a torrent of artificial stimuli designed to capture attention at any cost. By spending hours immersed in simulated realities, we are training our neural systems to respond to signals that have no physical substance, creating a disconnection between body and mind. And perhaps you have already felt this without knowing how to explain it. The perception of time, space, and otherness is being rewritten. The now becomes fragmented and the depth of experience is traded for the speed of visual consumption. The result is a consciousness that feels strange within its own body, a mind that desperately seeks digital dopamine while the physical senses wither from lack of real use. And when that happens, the real world begins to feel too slow to inhabit, transforming the human being into a passive spectator of their own biological simulation. The final impact of this erosion of the real is the collapse of the singular identity we have cultivated for millennia. If the world around us is a simulacrum, who is the self that observes it? And if the environment is artificial, does the self that reacts to it remain authentic? Jean Baudrillard suggested that in hyperreality, the subject and object merge in a short circuit of information. We become part of the simulation, turning our own lives into a spectacle to be consumed by other simulacra. Identity ceases to be an internal core of values and experiences and becomes an external performance, a managed profile that obeys the logic of the network. And the more you adapt, the further you drift from something you can no longer even name. This process of neural reconfiguration pushes us into a state of existence where we no longer know where we end and where the simulation begins. The authentic you is being slowly replaced by a version optimized for the system, and perhaps this replacement has already begun, a long time ago. And if physical reality has been replaced by the image and our perception has been hijacked by this new world of simulacra, we need to understand that this change is not just external. It is a work of internal engineering, and this completely changes the problem, because it is not something you can simply turn off. To understand how the simulation is rewriting us, we need to look at the invisible mechanisms shaping our behavior, the architecture of deception. The reconfiguration of human consciousness does not occur through violent external imposition, but through precision engineering that targets the deepest vulnerabilities of our biology. And the most dangerous part is that it works best when you do not realize it is happening. The architecture of the digital simulacrum was designed to hijack the brain's reward system, flooding our synapses with dopamine at every screen-mediated interaction. To the observer, it seems like mere modern convenience, but to the nervous system, it is a drastic transition. We are trading the slow and profound satisfaction of real achievements for ephemeral and addictive cycles of symbolic validation. And at some point, your brain begins to prefer it. This constant stimulation rewrites neural pathways, atrophying our ability to focus on objects that do not shine or send notifications. The result is a fragmented mind, whose thresholds for boredom have been reduced to nearly zero. And when you can no longer tolerate silence, something essential has already been lost. Historically, human consciousness depended on imagination to fill the gaps of the physical world. When reading a book or hearing a story, the brain internally created the scene, the light, and the movement. The simulacrum inverted this process by delivering ready-made images, hyper-detailed and saturated. And when everything comes ready, you stop participating. When hyperreality provides everything in a pre-digested and visually perfect way, the brain's ability to generate autonomous mental images begins to wither. We are becoming passive receivers of an external aesthetic. And perhaps you have never realized that you are seeing through eyes that are no longer entirely yours. Our dreams and inner visualizations become colonized by the visual patterns of major platforms and artificial intelligence. This atrophy of imagination is a form of death of psychic sovereignty. And without internal sovereignty, any reality can be imposed. The plasticity of the brain, once our greatest evolutionary advantage for adaptation, has become the gateway through which the simulation rewrites us. And what was once adaptation is now conditioning. Modern neuroscience studies suggest that constant consumption of fragmented information streams is physically altering the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for critical judgment and impulse control. We are evolving to process data across vast surfaces, but with almost no depth. You receive more information, but build less understanding, what Jean Baudrillard described as the triumph of extension over intention. This biological shift means that our consciousness is losing the ability to connect cause and effect in a linear way, living in a state of a digital, eternal now, where the past is forgotten in seconds, and the future is nothing more than constant anxiety. And in this state, you are never truly present. The darkest consequence of this architecture of deception is the dissolution of the neurological boundary between what is a biological fact and what is a digital symbol. And when that boundary disappears, anything can affect you as if it were real. For a brain reconfigured by the simulacrum, an insult written on a screen can trigger the same stress response as a real physical attack, and a like can generate the same sense of tribal acceptance as an embrace. This categorical confusion allows hyperreality to govern our emotions and behaviors with an efficiency no totalitarian regime has ever achieved, and the most unsettling part is that you call this normal life. We are losing our anchoring in physical reality, becoming beings whose existential crises and peaks of euphoria are dictated by invisible algorithms. And when your emotions are no longer yours, who is living for you? Consciousness, once tied to the cycles of the earth and the body, now floats in a vacuum of abstractions, where truth is no longer a pursuit, but a byproduct of the repetition frequency of the symbols that surround us. And the more something repeats, the more true it seems. If our brain is being physically reconfigured and our emotions are trapped in abstract symbols, what happens to the idea of who we are? If the biological and psychic foundation of our perception has changed, the identity we believe we possess may be nothing more than a mirage in the mirror, and perhaps you are already looking at that reflection, without realizing it is not fixed. To understand this disintegration, we must explore how the singular self has transformed into a fragmented shadow. The self distributed in the flow. The idea of a solid and indivisible self, which accompanied us since the Enlightenment, is collapsing under the weight of hyperreality. And this collapse is not abrupt, it is silent. In the simulation, identity has ceased to be an internal and stable core and has become a series of fragments distributed across multiple platforms, profiles, and databases, Jean Baudrillard suggested that we have become terminals of multiple networks, where our essence is shattered in 1,000 directions to feed the logic of the system. For the modern observer, there is no longer a clear distinction between who they are in the silence of their room and who they perform to be on the digital stage. And perhaps you have never stopped to notice which of these versions is more real. This fragmentation reconfigures consciousness to operate in a state of functional schizophrenia. We are forced to manage multiple versions of ourselves, each adapted to the demands of a different algorithm, until the center of gravity of our personality disappears. And when that happens, only adaptation remains. As we delegate our choices, tastes, and memories to digital systems, our identity begins to be outsourced. And outsourcing who you are is the beginning of the loss of autonomy. Consciousness becomes a passive receiver of suggestions that shape our behavior before we are even aware of a desire. In hyperreality, the self ceases to be the subject of the story and becomes a predictive profile. We are what the system says we are, and the more it gets it right, the less you question it. This process creates a short circuit in the perception of individuality. If my thoughts are induced by a personalized stream of information, to what extent can I claim they are mine? And this question is rarely asked. The neural reconfiguration here is profound. As the brain stops practicing introspection and begins to live in a constant state of reaction to external stimuli that simulate our own will, and when you only react, you stop choosing. In the absence of a real and grounded self, the simulation offers digital narcissism as a form of compensation. We are encouraged to turn our private lives into spectacle, exchanging depth of being for breadth of visibility. And the more you appear, the less you know yourself. However, this narcissism is paradoxical. It does not celebrate the individual, but rather their conformity to the aesthetic standards of the simulacrum. Consciousness becomes addicted to the gaze of the other, and loses the ability to validate its own existence without mediation. And without internal validation, any external absence becomes pain. Intimacy, once the soil where the soul blossomed, is now sacrificed on the altar of hyperreality, where what is not shared seems not to have existed, and what does not exist loses its value. Memory is the cement that binds the fragments of time into a coherent identity narrative, but simulation operates in a perpetual and volatile present that dissolves our connection with the past. And without a past, there is no continuity. By entrusting our memories to clouds and digital archives, we stop internally processing our personal history. And when you do not process, you do not integrate. The brain, freed from the burden of remembering, also loses the ability to learn from experience and to build wisdom based on time. We become instant beings devoid of roots and depth, floating in an ocean of simulacra, where yesterday's truth is irrelevant to today's simulation, and where you begin to lose continuity with yourself. This final reconfiguration of identity prepares the human being for their obsolescence. If the self is just a mutable data pattern, it becomes impossible to distinguish where human consciousness ends and where the architecture of the machine that sustains it begins. And when that line disappears, something essential disappears as well. If the self has become a fragmented pattern distributed across invisible networks, who is in fact taking control of this narrative? And perhaps the most uncomfortable question is another: is this still under your control? When our identity ceases to be ours, the vacuum is filled by a new and silent force. And the most unsettling part is that it does not need to impose itself. To understand who now inhabits the space of our mind, we must look at the new unconscious we are building. The Great Substitution by artificial intelligence. The most advanced phase of neural reconfiguration occurs when we stop using technology to perform tasks and begin using it to process reality itself. And at that point, you no longer notice the transition. Artificial intelligence is not just organizing data, it is taking on the role of mediator of thought, filtering truth and shaping conclusions before human reasoning even begins. And when mediation happens before consciousness, you call it independent thinking. By delegating discernment to algorithms, we are allowing an unprecedented cognitive atrophy in the history of the species. The brain, following the law of least effort, deactivates neural pathways linked to deep analysis, blindly trusting the authority of the machine. And the more you trust, the less you verify. This silent substitution creates a dependent consciousness, a mind that no longer knows how to reach truth on its own. And when you lose the path, any direction seems valid. Carl Jung spoke of the collective unconscious as a reservoir of archetypes and ancestral wisdom that united humanity. However, in hyperreality, this reservoir is being replaced by an algorithmic unconscious. And this changes everything, because now the mirror responds. Our dreams, fears, and desires are being mapped and then returned to us in the form of AI-generated content, creating an infinite mirroring where the machine learns from us only to teach us how we should be. The machine learns from you, and then gives you back an edited version of who you should become. And if you accept that version, you stop discovering yourself. The danger is not that AI becomes conscious, but that we become so predictable and mechanical that our consciousness becomes indistinguishable from code. And when that happens, the difference no longer matters. We are losing access to the mystery of the wild unconscious, replacing it with a sanitized and programmed version, where human spontaneity is seen as error, and creativity is reduced to the recombination of pre-existing patterns. And when everything has already been predicted, the unexpected disappears. Intuition has always been the silent compass of consciousness. But the simulation does not tolerate the uncertainty of intuition. It demands predictability, control, repetition, and the more you adapt to this, the less you feel. As we surround ourselves with systems that predict what we want, we stop exercising the muscles of subtle perception. And without subtle perception, you lose access to what cannot be measured. The consciousness reconfigured by AI becomes linear and binary, losing the ability to feel the nuances of existence. The meaning of life, once an active and often painful search, is being replaced by optimization of experience. And when everything is optimized, nothing is deeply lived. We are exchanging meaning for algorithmic satisfaction. And in this process, something essential falls silent. The Great Substitution culminates in Jean Baudrillard's most unsettling question. If a machine can perfectly simulate intelligence, creativity, and even empathy, what remains unique in the human being? And perhaps the answer is not where you are looking. Simulation pushes us toward obsolescence not by surpassing us, but by convincing us that we are merely biological information processors. And if you accept that definition, the process is already complete. The neural reconfiguration is finished. And you did not even notice when it happened. However, it is exactly here that something unexpected emerges. Because when everything can be simulated, something begins to stand out. And if the mind has been hijacked, identity fragmented, and thought replaced, the scenario seems like total defeat. But there is a flaw in this system, a flaw that cannot be corrected, a flaw that cannot be programmed. And that flaw is you. Because as the gears of the machine become too perfect, the glow of witnessing consciousness begins to stand out by its own organic and inexplicable nature. And perhaps you have already felt this in silence. To find the way back, we must now abandon the map and dive into the only thing the simulation cannot touch, the awakening of the observer. Because after deconstructing the layers of simulacra and understanding how hyperreality hijacked our perception, we are forced to face the void. And the void is frightening because it cannot be filled with images. If everything we think, feel, and desire can be simulated or reprogrammed, what in fact remains essentially human? And this is the question the system avoids letting you ask. The answer does not lie in our biology nor in our memory. Both are vulnerable to reconfiguration, but in the very fact that there is something that perceives the simulation, something that observes without being altered. Elegant spirituality, in this context, emerges as the science of the observer, not as belief, but as direct experience, the recognition that there is a residue the code cannot touch. While the simulacrum tries to colonize every synapse, there is a space of absolute silence between one thought and another that remains intact. And this space cannot be accessed by any algorithm. This fertile void is our only anchor to reality, the witnessing consciousness that observes the parade of images without being consumed by them, proving that, although we may be immersed in the simulation, the substance of our perception comes from a source that was never created within it. Awakening within hyperreality does not require us to turn off screens or isolate ourselves from the modern world, but to perform an internal movement of radical disidentification. And this changes everything, because it does not depend on the system. It depends on perception. Jean Baudrillard showed us that the system wins when we believe the simulacrum is our identity. Spiritual awakening occurs when we realize we are the observer of the simulacrum, not the character it created for us. And the moment you see this, something dissolves. By withdrawing emotional investment from digital projections and the personas we manage, the reconfigured self begins to lose strength. And when it loses strength, silence appears. It is a process of mystical death in the age of information. We stop fighting the simulation and simply see it for what it is, a play of lights and shadows on a screen. And when you see the game, you are no longer inside it in the same way. In this clarity, the anxiety of the network dissipates, and consciousness regains its sovereignty, understanding that true reality does not need to be proven or captured. It simply is. There's a technical flaw in every perfect simulation. It cannot replicate the mystery of the now, and it is exactly here that everything changes. Hyperreality lives on projections of the future or nostalgia for the past, but the present moment cannot be rendered. It can only be lived. When you breathe and fully inhabit your body, without the mediation of a symbol or a screen, you create a short circuit in the neural reconfiguration process. And for a moment, everything slows down. The simulation demands that you are always somewhere else, Consciousness demands that you are exactly where you are. This state of pure presence is the greatest act of rebellion a human being can exercise today, and perhaps the only one that still remains. It is the moment when the soul reclaims the territory that seemed lost, proving that real life is not on the map, but in the silent act of existing. At the end of the journey, we realize that simulated reality is not an external prison. It is an invitation to remember who you are without it. If your consciousness is being reconfigured, perhaps it is because something deeper is trying to emerge, something that cannot be programmed, something that cannot be simulated. What remains human in the simulation is the ability to transcend form itself. We are consciousness experiencing itself through a filter, and awakening consists in not confusing the filter with the light. As we integrate this perception, fear disappears, because we understand that truth was never at risk. The desert of the real is not the end. It is simply the place where you realize that you were never what you thought you were. And if you made it this far, perhaps something has already changed. The simulation can reconfigure your brain, but it cannot rewrite your origin. And now I ask you, if the map replaced the world, who is looking at the map now? If this exploration touched your consciousness, subscribe and join us on this journey of awakening. In the next video, we will dive even deeper into the breakdown of the final identity. Until then, remain present. The real is still waiting for you.